like to think I'm a rebel. I'm revolutionary. I like to think to bring change.
For 3 decades, we've been told that the murder of Tupac Shakur was a simple matter of street justice. A casino scuffle, a chance encounter on a neon-lit strip, and a hail of gunfire from a white Cadillac. It's a narrative that fits neatly into a police report, but it doesn't fit into the FBI's vault. Under the Freedom of Information Act, over 4,000 pages of federal documents have slowly bled into the public domain. And what investigators found inside those files didn't just complicate the story, it left them speechless. These weren't just reports on a rapper, these were the logs of a high-stakes intelligence operation that had Tupac Shakur in its crosshairs years before he ever set foot in Las Vegas. The FBI wasn't just watching Tupac, they were documenting a revolution. When the Bureau finally opened its secret files after that fatal night in 1996, they discovered a web of extortion that reached into the highest levels of political activism. They found evidence of a domestic terror group, the Jewish Defense League, allegedly running a $1 million protection racket against death row stars. They found logs of Tupac's phone calls, detailed maps of his travel, and most chillingly, warnings of an imminent hit that were filed and forgotten in a government basement weeks before the shooting. But the most devastating revelation in the FBI's folder isn't about who killed Tupac. It's about who watched him die. Tonight, we are going beyond the official police narrative. We are deconstructing the declassified memos that prove the federal government viewed Tupac Shakur as a national security threat. We're looking at the secret informants who were embedded in his security detail. And we're revealing the contents of the final, heavily redacted page of his file. A page so sensitive that, to this day, the government claims its release would threaten the safety of the United States. The streets said it was a gang war. The files say it was a sanctioned execution. It's time to look at the evidence the FBI didn't want you to see. The unsub file and Black Panther bloodline. Over the years, concerned Americans and fans of the legendary singer have wondered why the FBI was so complacent about the investigation of his death. They were uncooperative and seemed so reluctant about the search until the truth finally resurfaced. His affiliation with a social rebel group called the Black Panthers. This was more than just the street justice they tagged, but a long-standing issue that existed even before the birth of the iconic singer. Long before the 1996 Las Vegas shooting, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, had already opened files on Tupac Shakur because of his family's deep ties to the Black Panther Party, a revolutionary black political organization that had been heavily monitored by U.S. intelligence agencies since the late 1960s. Tupac was born into a family that was already under government scrutiny. His mother, Afeni Shakur, and stepfather, Mudulu Shakur, were prominent members of the Black Panther Party and were among the defendants in the famous Panther 21 trial in 1971. During that period, the FBI ran a secret counterintelligence program called COINTELPRO. This program was designed to monitor, infiltrate, and disrupt groups considered politically radical, including the Black Panthers and other civil rights movements. Because of this program, many Black Panther members were placed under constant surveillance, including wiretaps, informants, and extensive government dossiers documenting their activities. As Tupac grew up surrounded by this political environment, his name and associations inevitably appeared in intelligence records connected to the Shakur family and Panther networks. All this happened before he became famous, or even an activist. In a short time, Tupac became a high-profile rapper, known for politically charged lyrics about police brutality, racial inequality, and systemic oppression. This gave the FBI more reasons to believe his alliance with his family, especially to instigate a political militia. Hence, the FBI continued to maintain files related to threats, investigations, and intelligence reports involving him. Through the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, portions of Tupac's FBI file were eventually released. These documents confirmed that the Bureau had compiled about 102 pages of records about him, including investigations into death threats and other incidents linked to extremist groups. At the conclusion of their report, the FBI made it clear to the public that Tupac Shakur's death was just like having a taste of his own medicine. According to them, They have seen the impact of Tupac's political conspiracies over the years, even though they have no evidence of his affiliation with the Black Panther.
I mean, if this is truly a melting pot in the country where we care about and Lady Liberty got a hand like this, she really loves us, then we really need to be like that. And it needs to be the black kids. If there's a white person who got money, then he need to help them. He need to help black kids, Mexican kids.
The FBI stated that Tupac Shakur polarized the opposing sides with his message of hate and intolerance. Instead of using his talents to bring the races together, he did everything imaginable, whether intentional or not, to make peaceful coexistence impossible. He lived in a country where homicide rates are the highest in the world, but still blindly promoted the indiscriminate use of guns and violence to make amends. Even before his death, he became a victim of his own message when he was shot 5 times during a 1994 robbery attempt. As if promoting physical violence was not enough, Shakur went further to sexually harass a 21-year-old girl, which led to his arrest in 1995.
I don't want that. I just want the chance to make right from all the bad things that I got. You know, I got a lot of things against me. I got a lot of people that look up to me, and I don't want the last place for them to see me is in jail.
It turned out that the positive image of women and fatherhood he tried to convey in some of his early songs does not reflect his personality. His activism and many attempts to overcome violence by explicitly endorsing it were described as the exact attitude of the Black Panther mission. Hence, he just became another victim in a hopelessly tragic way of life he himself helped advance. Shakur will now be remembered forever for leading a generation down the road to neglect and despair. Unfortunately, in our world, all the wrong role models attract the attention and sympathy of the masses. Tragically, those who seek to make a positive difference are often overlooked or suppressed by the powers that be. It is disappointing that 28 years after his death, Dr. Martin Luther King's message of nonviolence and assimilation can be superseded by the narrow, intolerant message professed by individuals such as white supremacists, anti-Semite, and in this case, Tupac Shakur. With the FBI's focus on Shakur's violent nature and his affiliations with the Black Panther, which are not in any way linked to his death, what other controversy could have resulted in his assassination? Was there anything the FBI might be hiding from the public? Let's find out. The JDL extortion plot. According to the FBI documents released through FOIA after the murder of Tupac, the investigative report suggested that the Jewish Defense League, JDL, or individuals connected to it, were extorting rappers by issuing threats and offering protection for a fee. Among the names mentioned was Tupac Shakur, who was one of the targets. The files speculated that the JDL leader had reached out to Tupac in an alleged extortion and intimidation effort. Now, in case you want to know, the Jewish Defense League, SJDL, is a far-right political organization in the United States, Canada, and France.
Let the United Nations know that we haven't forgotten the UN's Declaration of Human Rights, and that we do not intend to forget it.
Its goal is to protect Jews from anti-Semitism by whatever means necessary. The FBI has classified them as a right-wing terrorist group since 2001, and is also designated as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. The FBI has been aware of this conspiracy against the actor through their surveillance structure, but did nothing about it. They only released this information after his death to prove that Tupac Shakur's life was constantly under scrutiny. According to documents released by the FBI investigated whether the JDL or figures associated with it were involved in fronting rackets targeting West Coast rappers. In Tupac's case, they noted that the organization had offered protection in exchange for money after issuing these threats. The FBI treated these threats seriously enough to open an investigation documenting the organization's unusual and aggressive activities. But despite the attention these threats received, the records do not establish a direct link to Tupac's murder. The fatal shooting that ultimately claimed Tupac's life occurred on September 7, 1996, in Las Vegas. He had attended the Mike Tyson vs. Bruce Seldon heavyweight title fight at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. He was accompanied by Suge Knight, CEO of Death Row Records, and a large entourage of about 10 cars, carrying his bodyguards and other associates. According to reports and surveillance footage, Orlando Anderson, a member of the Southside Compton Crisps, was walking through the casino lobby when he encountered Tupac and his entourage. A verbal confrontation led to a brief physical brawl between Anderson and Tupac's entourage. Tupac's entourage overpowered Anderson, and he escaped without being arrested. Shortly after the fight, Tupac was riding in a car driven by Suge Knight, CEO of Death Row Records, when gunmen in a white Cadillac opened fire. Tupac was shot multiple times and died 6 days later, sparking a wave of speculation and conspiracy theories. Investigations and public reporting consistently indicate that the Las Vegas shooting was tied to his altercation with Orlando Anderson at the MGM Grand earlier that evening.
1995 to date, have you ever ridden in a white Cadillac?
No.
Do you know anyone who owns a white Cadillac?
No.
Anderson, an alleged Los Angeles gang member, has vigorously denied any involvement in the murder.
However, that was not all the speculation. Former police officials, investigative journalists, and members of the hip-hop community have explored other theories, including possible involvement of Suge Knight or internal disputes at Death Row Records. It was said that before that incident, Shakur had threatened to leave Death Row Records, and Suge did not support his decision. This resulted in an internal crisis that could have led to Suge men attacking Tupac and excluding him. This was the closest case regarding Tupac's death, due to the testimony of one FBI informant in his circle. Kevin Hackey, who had worked as a bodyguard and security member around Tupac and Death Row Records, revealed that he had secretly been acting as an FBI informant during the mid-1990s. Hackey testified that he had spent about 3 years close to Tupac's security circle while providing information to federal investigators. Because security personnel were responsible for protecting artists like Tupac, someone with direct access to the inner workings of Death Row's protection system was also communicating with federal authorities. The disclosure shocked many observers because it suggested the FBI had inside visibility into the environment surrounding Tupac during one of the most volatile periods of the East Coast-West Coast rap feud. It was Hackey who revealed this tense atmosphere within Death Row Records after Tupac's death. However, he never mentioned that Suge was directly involved.
Is there any way we can take him on the road with Digital Underground?
I was like, he can do some background rapping, he can carry some shit, be a roadie. We can always use another Humpty dancer.
For many researchers and fans, this contradiction is what makes everyone speechless. This became questionable when it was found out that the FBI had hidden the names of other security informants who could have given the right information about Tupac's death. The public was now left with the question: an artist surrounded by security, federal surveillance, and industry power was still killed in a brazen drive-by shooting on one of the busiest streets in Las Vegas? There's more to this question that urgently needs answers. However, despite all these speculations about Shakur's death, the FBI said his death had nothing to do with a JDL attack. What else could the FBI be hiding about Tupac Shakur's death? Were there previous incidents that could have been linked to it? Their FOIA document exposes it all, that the New York setup documents. Before Shakur passed on during the Las Vegas shootout, there had been several cases of attempted murder on him, which the FBI could have looked into, but rather took it for granted. One of those incidents was the popular New York setup, or controversy, around the 1994 Quad Recording Studios shooting, of which the FBI was connected to. Tupac Shakur was shot and robbed in the lobby of Quad Recording Studios in Manhattan, New York on November 30th, 1994. A moment now seen as a pivotal turning point in his life and in hip-hop's history. Tupac had traveled to New York with his legal team while awaiting a verdict in his sexual abuse case. That night, he agreed to attend an impromptu recording session arranged by a promoter who offered him money to lay down a verse. According to multiple accounts of the event, Tupac and his entourage entered the Quad Studios building, only to meet 3 armed men who ambushed them. They ordered everyone to the floor, pistol-whipped Tupac, shot him 5 times, and stole tens of thousands of dollars in jewelry. Tupac survived, but the incident left him severely wounded and haunted. The plan was to paint this incident as just a random robbery, but it was not. And soon, the truth was revealed. From the beginning, Tupac believed the disguise of robbery, but later, he insisted that he had been set up to be attacked. He openly suspected that associates of his rivals in the East Coast hip-hop scene knew about the plan and let it happen. And some confrontational comments suggested that figures tied to Bad Boy Records were present upstairs at the time. What the FBI found out was terrifying and unbelievable. According to a publication by the Los Angeles Times in the mid-2000s, the FBI records showed a confidential informant had told federal authorities that 2 New York hip-hop executives, later identified as James Jimmy Henchman Rosemond and James Sabatino, arranged for the ambush at Quad Studios. According to the informant, the attackers were waiting in the lobby. Their arrival was methodically coordinated to make the assault look like a robbery, when, in reality, it was meant to send a message or weaken Tupac's influence. The FBI connection, which people refer to as New York setup, claims that the Bureau was monitoring the situation. This does not imply that the FBI orchestrated the attack, but rather that the agency had described the attack as a product of intricate planning and not just a simple street robbery. This was in accordance with the police reports, records, and their informants. However, this reporting became controversial and was retracted in part because later reviews showed that at least some of the alleged FBI documentation cited in the article could not be verified and may have been fabricated or misinterpreted. Still, the idea that Tupac might have been lured into a trap resonated with fans and fueled the emerging East Coast, West Coast hip-hop rivalry. Because Tupac himself believed that people around his New York rivals either knew about the planned ambush or did nothing to stop it. In the years that followed, no one was ever charged in connection with the Quad Studios shooting. Investigators have maintained it was a robbery gone wrong, and it was in no way linked to his death in 1996. The final redacted names, it's been 3 decades, and yet the death of Tupac Shakur remains one of the most debated tragedies in hip-hop history. Investigators, journalists, and fans continue to analyze the events surrounding his life and the documents released by federal authorities. While the basic facts of the crime are known, the larger picture involves surveillance files, redacted government records, and a complicated legacy tied to his family's political history. One of the most pathetic mysteries about his death involved the redacted pages of federal files. Similar to the local police investigation, records were maintained by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It's no longer news that, through Freedom of Information Act requests, hundreds of pages related to Tupac were eventually released. However, some sections of these documents remain heavily redacted, including final pages withheld under national security exemptions. These redactions have fueled speculation that federal authorities possess the knowledge of informants, threats, or ongoing investigations that could not be publicly disclosed. In many FOIA releases, entire names and paragraphs are blacked out, suggesting that individuals connected to the music industry or criminal investigations may have been cooperating with federal authorities. Could this mean that the Tupac assassination was connected to the assumptions of the government that Tupac was spearheading street gangs to form a militia against the government? If not, why was a major part of this investigation hidden from the public? Could it be that they knew who was responsible for his death, but failed to make an arrest because of a superior backup? These questions concerning Tupac's death have continued to multiply as the investigation broadens, until the truth is finally revealed. Final notes. Part of the reason Tupac attracted federal attention long before his death lies in his family history. His mother, Tupac Shakur,
when his first record was appearing on MTV, Tupac was beaten in the head very badly.
And his stepfather, Tupac Shakur, were both connected to the Black Panther movement and other revolutionary groups. The controversial COINTELPRO counterintelligence program of the FBI may have monitored them, yet there was no proof that his death was associated with it. Now, years later, through interviews and investigative reporting, it's been revealed that there were informants within Tupac's own professional circle. Former law enforcement officials and journalists have discussed cases in which individuals connected to death row records or the hip-hop industry provided information to authorities. However, aside from Kelvin Hackey, other names connected to these informants remain redacted. This also proved that the FBI had deliberately hidden information from the public that could implicate someone they wanted to keep safe. What about the Quad Studios incident that happened 2 years before Tupac's death? He was shot multiple times during a robbery inside Quad recording studios in Manhattan. Tupac believed the attack had been orchestrated rather than random, and the incident intensified tensions between East Coast and West Coast rap circles. Some reports also suggest that federal authorities may have been monitoring the area or investigating criminal activity connected to the music industry at the time. However, no official findings confirm that the government played any role in the attack itself, nor was there any arrest or prosecution of those involved. This raises even more questions. Ultimately, what is known to the public to date is that Tupac's death sits at the intersection of gang violence, music industry rivalries, and decades of federal surveillance linked to political activism. The Las Vegas shooting itself appears tied to gang retaliation, but FBI files, redacted informants, and long-standing intelligence records add layers of complexity to the story. Even today, the contrast between the local police investigation and the partially hidden federal records continues to spark debate. What remains clear is that Tupac's life and death were shaped by forces far beyond the music industry and deeper than the police investigations. However, it's been made clear that the FBI's hidden evidence proved nothing but a huge conspiracy. Tell us your honest opinion about the death of Tupac Shakur in the comments.